Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour in Las Vegas. This is the fourth leg of 5 events of the multi-million-dollar Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. In this tournament, we have Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana, Levon, Aronian, Pragnananda, Ramesh Babu, and many more strong top super grandmasters competing, playing Fischer Random Chess, or as we know as the Freestyle Chess. And today in our video, our main character is Magnus Carlsen, the GOAT, the world #1, and also the other main character is American Super Grandmaster Levon Aronian. Aronian, he is he is somehow from the older generations already. He is 42 years old. So compared to Gukash, Prague, who are the younger generations already, he is considered as a more experienced chess player. And today, he is playing against Magnus Carlsen. And guess what? The big news is that he successfully eliminated Magnus Carlsen, sending him to the lower bracket of this whole format. And then he himself went up to the winner's bracket. But the whole path wasn't easy because winning against Magnus is not the easiest thing to ever do. They had equal scores, but then they went into the playoffs, which is when everything started to become very fast and full of thrilling moves and positions. So today we're going to be taking a look at these two games from their playoffs. And this is round 1. Magnus is with the white pieces, Levon with the black pieces. And let's take a look at this game. So this is blitz chess, blitz time control. And again, as I've said, Fischer Random Chess, so all the pieces on the back rank are randomly placed with no patterns. And here Magnus starts with the move c4, we have c5, e3, knight f6. So there are no openings basically in Fischer Random Chess. All you need to do is to follow the rules that you can think of and try to just develop your pieces normally. Here we have knight f3, b6, bishop e2, g6, short castle, and here bishop g7, fianchettoing the bishop, b4, short castle. Both sides are actually playing extremely well in the first opening stage, knight c3, knight c6, and the position is getting more and more similar to standard chess, like it should be. We have b takes c5 and h3 was played. Then here we have the queens off the board, rook takes b1 and d6 to make the pawn structure become more solid. These three pawns are they defend each other. The knight defends the e7 pawn, so black is having a really good control of the center. Here, Magnus decides to go for d3, and instead of going for this very aggressive looking move d4, this is a move that gives black the initiative. Even though at first sight it might seem quite aggressive and gaining control of the center, but after c takes d4, and let's say you take with a pawn, you can also take with a knight, but after knight takes d4, and black just simply takes, e takes d4, and then knight e4 jumps in, the bishop is putting pressure on the d4 pawn, the rook is attacking the c4 pawn, and these two pawns are kind of floating, no other pawns can reach them, and black is doing slightly better here with putting a lot of pressure on the center white pawns. So that is why instead Magnus decides to go for something more solid and plays the move d3. Here Aronian decides to coordinate his pieces and plays the move knight d7. Magnus jumps in with the knight to knight d5. We have the bishops off the board, rook takes a1, and here Levon goes for e6 to kick this very annoying knight away back to c3. And here he plays knight b6, rook b1, rook d8, and now black's idea might be planning to go for d5 at some point to open up the position. Here we have rook fc1, and here Levon decides to double the rooks, rook d7, but also instead of the very basic idea of doubling rooks, This might also be one of black's ideas to gain control, to protect the 7th rank, and the rook is very flexible. The c8 and d7 rooks are all very flexible. They can either go to this side or go to this side. So there are many options. It depends on how actually white reacts. Here Magnus decides to play knight d2. Also his idea of rerouting his knights, maybe the bishop can go to f3 to take a better scope on the big diagonal. Aronian calmly plays the move king g7, knight b3, and here finally he takes control of the b file. d4 was played. Magnus no longer wants to sit and wait because this position is just so boring. Probably white can even play something like king f1, just waiting back and forth, and if no one does anything like to break the position, then this might just end in a very boring draw. So here Magnus is the side who is going to break things first, and he plays the move d4. But you always have to be very careful with these pawn push moves because pawns can never go back. And after you push the pawns, you have to think of these, you have to think of the coincidences and or the outcomes of these pawn pushes. And after d4, it's very obvious that the c4 pawn just lost a protector or a defender, and the bishop is defending it, so this pawns might lead to some future weaknesses in white's territory, and that is why after the move d4, Aronian is suddenly gaining a small initiative. And let's see if he can successfully improve his advantage. Here he takes the pawn on d4, excuse me, and after e takes d4, d5 was played. Very accurate and nice response by Aronian, because if he had played something else, let's say the second best move here suggested by the engine is to play this awkward looking move rook d8, the idea of probably going to the c file or retreating this knight back to d7, but then simply this just might allow white to push a4 to start pushing the pawns, and white's attack will be faster than black's pawn pushes. So the speed here, the attacking speed by both sides are extremely important, and Aronian decides not to wait and goes for this really strong and hard move, d5. Asking white's pawn a question, are you going to take on d5 or are you going to ignore me? And here in the game, Magnus decides to go for this really reasonable move, c5. I mean, for most of us, when we take a look at this position, we would all be thinking of going c5 because it attacks the knight, and also, why not just create a big passed pawn? And it seems that white is really nice, doing really well here. The knight can jump to b5, attack the pawn, go to d6, but really, is it that good? Here, the best move for Magnus is to actually play knight c5 to attack the rook, and after the rook goes back, to take on d5. Or if you want to, you can also take on d5 immediately, but not the move c5, which seems really just like a very necessary and reasonable move, but it turns out to be a mistake and leading Magnus towards the wrong direction. This is the first move that white starts to go wrong, and this is the second one, knight d1. In general, don't ever move your knight back if it's not necessary, if it's not something that you're forced to do. Here, after knight d1, Levon brings the rook in with rook b4, and then Magnus decides to follow his plan of playing knight d1, but simply it just wastes too many moves, and Levon here plays knight takes b2, rook takes b2, and knight takes d4. Simply Magnus just blunders a pawn the knight cannot take back because you just lose the rook on b2. And here, bishop d1 was played. Maybe Magnus thought that he can still defend it, but it's not really possible. Rook c7, rook d2 attacking the knight goes back to c6. It is always nice to use a knight to prevent a passed pawn from pushing. And also black is just simply up a very healthy passed pawn in the center of the board. Bishop e2, bishop b7, rook c3, knight e5. Levon is maneuvering his knights and the bishops. And also worth noting is that both sides here are already in time trouble. Magnus only has 4 seconds left on the clock, and he starts to play extremely fast. Levon, with 13 seconds left on the clock, replies calmly, and knight c4, bishop takes, rook takes. We have a pair of rooks off the board, and after knight b5, rook takes c5, I mean, under time pressure, anything can happen, and already Magnus is down 2 pawns. Knight c3 back, but the rest of the game is just very clean, a very clean win by Aronian, and he is now up 2 pawns with this outside pass pawn on a7, and after check, he wins another pawn, and White's kingside is just basically falling apart, and after the move, well, they still played on for a couple of moves, but immediately, there's nothing that White can do. Levon is doing great. Finally, he blocks the checks, and here Magnus resigned the game. Why? Even though White can take the e5 pawn, but after rook f5, obviously White cannot take to go into a king and pawn ending because that will be losing. So let's say if White goes for the check, but after king f8 attacking the rook goes away and you lose the pawn, and 2 pawns are gonna win, even though it's g and h pawns. But in this case, Black just needs to go up with the king and go for victory. So a really nice and clean win by Aronian in the very first game of the playoffs, but still they need to switch sides, switch colors. And now Levon is with the white pieces. I mean, already he has won with the black pieces against Magnus, so definitely with the white pieces, there are also chances. But for Magnus, he is in a must-win situation. So can Magnus have a comeback, or will Aronian simply just make a draw or even win the game to eliminate Magnus? So Aronian with the white pieces starts with f4, and as we see, the back rank pieces are again placed in different patterns. Here Magnus plays knight b6, knight b3. The opening is basically, well, not the opening, but the starting setups are basically quite normal for both sides, no huge mistakes. Magnus, at this point, has a slight advantage because his pieces are slightly more developed, but it's not a big deal. Levon trades the queens off the board because he only needs a draw. But for Magnus, he needs to win. Rook e1, bishop d5 takes. So again, both sides are just trading pieces. Long castle as well. b6, knight goes back. We have the knights off the board. Rook takes e4. c5 was played, c3, king c7, king c2, king goes up, knight c1. And as you can see, Levon is really good at these maneuvering moves, these positional play, to reroute his knight to better squares. And these quiet moves, but full of complex ideas, are always one of his best parts. So here, he goes for knight d3, following his idea. Rook f8, Magnus doubling the rooks on the f file, but really, it might seem quite scary. These 2 rooks on the f file, oh my god, what can White do? But, I mean, there's nothing that Black can go for. The rook can't really go to f1. I mean, Black can do that, but it doesn't really attack anything. Not f2, not f3. I mean, there's just no effective squares for Black to go to. So here, Aronian follows his plan and plays bishop e3, and Magnus plays bishop g7, because if you take on e3, then the more pieces you trade, the easier it will be for a draw. And White only needs a draw. Black needs to win. So obviously Magnus needs to avoid these trading lines, and here he plays the move bishop g7, also preventing the idea of bishop h6 by White. Here Aronian plays bishop f4. I mean, White is not afraid of knight takes f4. The knight trading for the bishop is actually better for the white pieces. And here Magnus plays d6, rook e1. But the pawn on d6 might become a weakness in the future. Attacked by the bishop, maybe rook e6 is possible. So it might become a problem for Black. And here Magnus plays the move king d7 back. Here Aronian plays a4. Already on the king side, there's nothing that White can do, so you just open up a second battleground. And on the queen side here, Aronian also tries to go for some counterplay. a4, h6, h4, rook e7. But, I mean, Aronian is really happy to trade pieces. Knight e7, bishop e3 back, rook f3, rook g1. I mean, the position is right now pretty much equalized, and Aronian is happy with it. But for Magnus, he is in a desperate situation for a win. He goes for the move knight f5, but here simply bishop f4, defending the g3 pawn, no problems with that. c4, trying to put as much pressure as Black can. But here, knight e1 attacks the rook. Rook can only go to f2. King d1 was played. This rook looks kind of a little bit like dangerous on the f2 square. It might get trapped if black doesn't really pay attention to it. Bishop e5 was played, but again, knight g2, threatening king e1, king e2 ideas. We have bishop f4, another pair of pieces off the board. Already, Magnus himself also knows that this position is no longer a winning position for him. It's no longer that easy unless Aronian blunders a piece or something, or else he won't be able to win. He plays g5, still desperately looking for opportunities. h-g5, h-g5, knight h3. But here, both sides only have 6 seconds left on the clock, and Magnus goes for this move, rook h2. The best move is obviously to play rook f3, but after knight g5, the rook takes on g3, and this is a dead draw. So a draw means like it's a loss for Magnus, so he decides to play rook h2, but simply he is down a pawn, and after knight g5, d5, looking for counterplay, maybe d4, can it work? But Levon just defends, well, he pushes his pawn, attacks the knight, and defends with knight f3, and this knight suddenly can jump to d4 to fix everything, and after rook f2, knight e1 is a slight mistake. It is better for white to play knight e5 check, and after king e6 to play the move rook e1 to defend. And if you play knight e4, well, unfortunately, there's knight c4. So knight e1 is also fine, but black gives black the chance to play knight e4 to take the d2 pawn. But like Aronian, he defends it with rook g2. Rook goes to f1. Again, if black takes and trades the rooks off the board, and after knight f2, it's again a draw because black wins the pawn back. But Magnus can't really afford a draw, and he plays the move rook f1, king e2 up, rook h1, but the pawn just starts rolling down the board, king e7, and the king stops it just in time. But after knight f3, the knight starts to go up the board. But after the move knight g5, this is a slight inaccuracy. Knight d4 would have been winning immediately for Aronian, because after takes, go up first to defend the d2 pawn, and then knight f5, knight h6 or knight e7 is coming, and the promotion is unstoppable. But here, knight g5 was played, but it's understandable since both sides don't have enough time. And here, after the move knight c5, knight takes g5 or rook takes b2 would have been draws. But again, draws is not good for Magnus. He needs to win, so he desperately tries to avoid it, plays knight c5, but now simply after knight h7, knight f7 would have been a cleaner win because knight h6 is coming. And after the move rook h1, rook g6 comes, knight h6 is unstoppable. But after the move knight h7, black can still defend with knight d7 and preventing knight f6. But after the move knight f8, knight e5 was played, rook g5, knight goes to d3, and rook takes d5 is actually played here by Aronian. And this is just a losing move. Both sides don't have enough time. But I mean, rook takes d5. Why is this just losing? Because black can play knight f4 to fork the king and the knight and the rook. And this is just simply completely winning for black, for Magnus. But guess what? He didn't see this fork. I mean, with 7 seconds left on the clock, this would have been really obvious. But probably already you're under so much pressure. And Magnus, unfortunately, missed this chance and plays the move rook e1. And Aronian is once again alive. He plays king f3, king takes g7, knight d7, king f7, knight goes there. And the endgame is quite simple. And here, after a couple of moves, the pawns, we have a couple of pawns off the board. But here, a mistake played by Magnus, knight d3, gives Aronian the chance. He played extremely well, rook d4, knight goes there, king goes up, knight goes there, and after king goes down, knight c4, a4, and the move rook c5. And with that, Magnus resigned the game. He could have played on, but already he knows that this is just, he won't be able to win this. Even white can give up the knight for the pawn, and it's still okay for white. So here, Magnus resigned this game. Aronian wins the second game of the playoffs and eliminates Magnus, sending him to the lower bracket while he himself is in the higher bracket. What, like these two games, what a game. I mean, it's also pretty lucky for Aronian to win this second game because he did miss this really basic tactic with rook d5 and then knight f4, but also Magnus just simply missed it, so it's understandable. And it also shows that how calm he is whenever he is under time control. So great techniques by him, and also these really nice maneuvers, especially the knights. What I can learn from his games is these maneuvers and also how calm he is. And also in standard chess, I can learn a lot of things from the openings that he played. In Fisher Random Chess, it's quite the same. So yeah, congratulations to him on winning these two really nice games against Magnus. And let's hope that he can keep on performing well in the later games. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed these two games as well as this video. And oh, another thing. Recently, I'm having some tournaments, and also I might be going to some camps or something, so I won't be able to update videos like 2 days a time, 2 days a video or 3 days a video, maybe just once a week. So I hope you guys can understand. But anyways, thank you for watching this video, and please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!